Welcome, Victor, to the Wholesome Crypto podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks. My pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome having you on. I've seen a lot about your background. I know that you work at Bison Trails. That's been acquired by Coinbase. So congratulations to you and your team for that. But before we get into everything that you're working on as a protocol specialist, I want to know more about you and what you were doing before even hearing about Bitcoin. Where was Victor back in the day?
Yeah. So, I graduated college in 2014, and originally I was a finance major. I thought I want to go into investment banking and blah blah blah. And then I ended up meeting people that work at banks, and I was like, oh, never mind, it's not for me. And so halfway through my junior year, I ended up switching my major to a double major in economics and psychology. And I still didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went into consulting, where you can just do a little bit of everything. Yeah. And I was very, very fortunate to land at EY. And while I was over there, I was in a rotational program called the Business Advisory Program, where you work with different teams on different projects, and you're kind of like a free resource for anybody within the advisory practice in financial services. So I was at EY for a little under 4 years. The first 2 I spent doing risk, regulatory compliance, operations, and other kind of like back office work. And then the next 2 years I spent doing digital strategy and user experience design. So working with some larger financial services companies in the world on gaps and dashboards and websites and social strategies.
There's a lot of new tech.
Yeah, a lot of new tech for banks, not new tech for tech.
They're always like the last adopters. I don't know why, but they have so much money and they just can't figure it out.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's interesting. I think working with large financial institutions both made me like less hopeful for them and more hopeful for them at the same time. It's really fascinating. But while I was in consulting in 2017, I kept hearing about Bitcoin and how it's doing so well and all this news coming out. And I kept meaning to make time to read the Bitcoin white paper, and I just never got around to it.
Did you have any friends in your group just saying, hey, Victor, this is the new thing. You have to get into it. Why aren't you paying more attention to Bitcoin?
Not really, because the friend group that I had was just not as technologically forward. It was a lot of like finance people and ops people and HR people, folks that are around. So I went to all city schools in New York, and so there's just not a strong tech presence in the New York City school circuit. So from that perspective, it was just what I was hearing in the news and on the online.
Nice, that's good. So
yeah,
for me, when I was like, I feel like mainstream media gets it wrong a lot of times, especially in the early days, talking about Bitcoin and how dangerous it is and why it's like evaluated at so much money. And it's surprising, like, all right, you kind of went with it with an open mind, like you're hearing about it and you just, all right, how is this really disrupting the space?
Yeah, well, I was very fortunate because I had a good friend of mine. His name is Asaf Yashayev. And he was at EY with me. We were actually in the same fraternity. We went to the same high school, and then we went to the same college, and we're in the same fraternity. And then we both worked at EY. And I asked him to help me get some Bitcoin because he was already invested. So I know that I'm now employed by Coinbase, so I apologize, but my first account was actually a Gemini account because I had much lower fees at the time. And so he helped me open an account, and I put all the money that I had into Bitcoin, which was around $3,000 at the time. At that point, would you believe it, I suddenly found the time and the motivation to read the Bitcoin white paper.
When you put skin in the game and you have your own money, it's like, oh, let me actually try to look at what I'm investing into.
Yeah, honestly, and I give that advice to everybody that I talk to. They keep saying, oh, I want to make a good time, I want to read, I want to learn. I said, put money into it. Not so much that you can't sleep, but enough that you really care. And like you're determined to find the right answer and then dig into it. And it's worked really, really well for me as a forcing function. And then as I spent more time and I read the Bitcoin white paper and didn't understand any of it, so I read the explainer for it, and I understood a tiny piece of that, and I read the explainer for the explainer. I just kept pulling at strings, and pretty soon it became all-consuming. It became the only thing I wanted to read about, the only thing I wanted to talk about, the only thing I wanted to think about or anything. And of course, it certainly helped that the price was going up, and I kept putting more money in. I felt like a genius. I was like, "Oh man, I'm so good at this."
Just put money in, it goes up, and I make my money. It's easy. Tell your parents.
Yeah, yeah. And it was funny because in early 2018, I left EY and I did some of my own consulting, and then I joined Consensus. And at that point, by the time I left EY, I was already like fully committed. And the price already started going down, but I've already bought it. I'm already fully committed to this. And so I was like, all right, I feel less like a genius now. And I felt much less like a genius towards late 2018. But, and a lot of 2019 actually. But it feels
it's
okay
a
now.
roller coaster ride that I think everyone has to experience. Like it's a very emotional ride. Like when I was in crypto, like in 2013 and then 2017, just remembering that roller coaster ride of like feeling like a genius, making a bunch of money, and then all of a sudden it all goes back down and you kind of went back to zero or even less. And then seeing that happen again in 2017, like my friends saying, "Oh no, like what do you think is going to happen next? Like Bitcoin's crashing, it's crashing, it's crashing." It's like, it's going to crash and it's going to go back up and then it's going to crash again. And you just don't have to worry unless you're like really good at timing this. Just hold it and wait until real change in the world happens.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And now today when I have conversations with people and they're curious about Bitcoin or crypto, I tell them, look, there's two things you need to know. In 2017, when you started, or 2018, when you started having these conversations, you looked at people and you said, hey, this whole thing might go to zero. Like that is a real possibility. This all might be just a bad idea and we're all going to lose all our money. That's how you open.
It is true.
It was true at the time. Right?
Absolutely.
And one today, like you don't do that anymore because now it's kind of like pretty obvious where things are going and the traction has been had and more people use it. It's obvious, I think, at this point what the trajectory is. And it wasn't obvious in 2017, or at least it wasn't obvious to me. Maybe it was to a lot of other people. But the other thing that I thought is really interesting is when I talk to people today and they say, how much money should I put in? What should I buy? Blah, blah, blah. And I tell them, well, just buy Bitcoin and Ethereum. Don't really look at anything else. And just kind of leave those on autopilot. And I tell them, but listen, hear me out here. When I was buying in 2017 and 2018, the price declined from the top to the bottom for Ethereum, 95%. Okay, and you know what I did? Yes, they say, what did you do, Viktor? I said, I kept buying more. That's all I was doing. I just kept buying more. But you have to be comfortable with the fact that this is an extremely volatile asset, and it went, probably won't go down 95% again. But like maybe it will, right? And this is something you have to gain a certain amount of comfort.
Exactly. With. That's like a thing that's hard to really understand because stock markets, regular like public companies are trading. It's so rare to see that kind of volatility. And there's typically a huge reason why, like a mortgage crisis, like a banking crisis, or something really bad has to happen in order for that to happen. With crypto, absolutely nothing can happen. Just speculation pumps it up and then it goes down. That's it.
Yeah.
That's why it's like kind of, wow. But that goes back to why like back in 2017, 2013, it kind of was backed by nothing other than people working on something. Now there's a lot more applications on Ethereum, a lot more reserves held in Bitcoin. So there is real use case behind it today. But again, that was, like you said before, it was speculation. It could have gone down to zero.
Yeah. And I think I was never worried about the speculation going down to zero. Actually, I was never concerned about that or bubbles, and I didn't care. What I did care about was whether or not the central idea of crypto, because when we think about what is the true innovation in crypto, in Bitcoin or Ethereum or all these things, like what's the thing? What's the thing that was actually invented? And it was actually like it wasn't blockchain, and it wasn't proof of work, and it wasn't hashing, it wasn't transaction,
encryption,
it wasn't any of this stuff. Right. Yeah. Well, what was invented is the incentive mechanism by which you pay these different entities to continue to produce work that is useful to the network that allows it to continue to exist. Right. So you have these three entities, which are the miners, the developers, and the users. And no one can exist without the others. No two can exist without the others. All three have to be in it to win it. And if not all three are there, then this whole thing just falls apart. And that was my concern. I said, look, maybe there's, if there's any way for this to go to zero, it would just be the discovery that the incentive mechanisms that we came up with don't make sense. Not we obviously built like Satoshi and folks since Satoshi. But yeah, that's really the only way that it can go to zero. And if it's not that, if it doesn't go to zero for that reason, then it's going to go to hundreds of trillions of dollars.
That's
right. Just because like if that incentive model makes sense, then all of this is validated. And then what you have to think of it as is currently this dial-up, absolute garbage technology that's super slow and super expensive. But if you just play it out as logical exercise, it's like, okay, if you make the assumption that it's going to get much cheaper and much faster and a much better user experience over time, does the core primitive make sense then? It will get adopted and is a lot better than existing systems? And the answer there is a resounding yes. And so I kind of said, okay, well, it's been, in 2017, I was like, okay, it's been, 8 years that this thing has been around. And if it was a really dumb idea, probably somebody smarter than me would have figured it out by now. And so I think that the risk that it's a dumb idea is probably very close to zero. And if it's that, then this thing is going to be, at infinity, quote unquote. And so I should just put all my money in and put all my time, and this should be the only thing that I spend, myself and my resources and my interest on.
And yeah, that's exactly right, because I mean, we do have a lot of like well-educated people working on this space, especially in Ethereum that we know of. But the way you're thinking now is like, how has that developed? I know you said you went to school for economics and had psychology. Do you think that, like for me at crypto, is all economics and psychology? It's a lot of both. Do you think your past education has helped you grasp an understanding much faster than maybe some other person like across the street or like?
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Absolutely. And that's something that I found really interesting, because when I came into crypto in 2017 and I left, mid 2017, and then I left EY in early 2018, I really didn't have that much time to learn crypto. And then I right away started consulting a bunch of smaller projects, specifically doing crypto economics and token design and incentives. And I felt a little bit like, not like a fraud, but I felt like, I don't belong here. Like, I don't know what I'm talking about.
Imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome. And then I realized that it just came so naturally to me, and it was so easy, and it just made such obvious sense of how things should work. And I realized that for the last 10 years, I've been training for a job that didn't exist until all of a sudden it started existing, right? Because the economics and psychology is really like what was driving me as a person. It's behavioral economics especially, right? So it's like, how do you change yourself? How do you change other people? How do you incentivize or disincentivize? Or how do you set up habits or all kinds of stuff? And then within consulting, I was doing a lot of regulatory stuff and process stuff and like user experience stuff. And it just ended up blending together. And then now all of a sudden you have to design and understand these systems that are meant to facilitate interactions between multiple parties that are at times, against one another or on opposite sides, but also like everybody has to be at the table in order to collaborate. And there's certain behaviors that you want to incentivize and certain behaviors you want to disincentivize. I just found that it came so naturally to me that I was a little bit taken aback. But then I leaned into it and I realized, okay, wow, like I really am becoming very quickly an expert on this, as much as an expert can be in a field that didn't exist up until a couple of years ago. And so when I was looking for my full-time role, the place where I actually landed was a team within Consensus that specifically focused on token design and crypto economics. And I was consulting for 3 different companies at the time, and all of them gave me essentially full-time offers saying like, hey, please come and in various ways come be one of the leaders of this project and help us make it successful. And then I had this offer for a job, like a regular job from Consensus. And the reason I joined Consensus was that you had this team there that was, I think total we went up to like five or six guys that all we did was crypto economics and token design. And we were just like, help clients with it, but also evaluate what's in the market and think about like what's happening, what's going on. And that created a really strong foundation for me to think about these things and basically see the crypto world through this lens in the years since. And it's sorry, I'll stop talking in 1 second.
No, keep going.
It's curious how many different ways this has played out. It's played out, in some of the decisions that we make around which protocols we support at Bison Trails, and we look at the incentives and we look at how they're designed and how they work. But it's also played out in some of the work that I do. In that, one of the things that I led last year was the first decentralized protocol merger between Keep Network and NewCipher. And it wasn't like an acquisition where it's like token for token. It was two networks coming together to create one token, one network, one identity. So it was a merger of equals. And what I found was that it's such a interesting crypto economic design problem because you're not just dealing with the incentives and setup and nodes and community within one protocol, one team, and one use case. You're doing that across two different protocols and teams and communities and use cases, and economic models and token models and staking models and slashing models, like all that stuff. So, it was super fascinating because this skill set kind of keeps showing itself and coloring the way that I see things, but also really enabling me to contribute in a way that's very unique.
So now that you're like seeing all these different types of models, is it like has it become tough for you to like, again, there's thousands of different cryptocurrencies out there, thousands of different styles of token economics. Has anything that you thought would not work surprised you?
Anything that I thought would not work surprised me.
And that did work, like in a positive sense for them. But because for me, sometimes when I work in industry and I kind of get into a thought process, it becomes like, oh, there's only one way of doing something, or like the best way of doing something.
Yeah. I think something that's challenging my assumptions right now is actually Solana. And I know the Solana founders really well, and we're friends with them. But I am not a believer in monolithic chains. I'm not a believer in kind of like unbounded throughput and the lack of a fee market. I see blockchains like in a very different way in that, there's unlimited demand for block space. And the cheaper the price, the more use cases that are enabled. And so like all that block space is going to be filled up until the point where it's no longer profitable to perform that action. And I wouldn't say that Solana has, 100% completely erased my questions or like changed my understanding of blockchain protocols. I think Solana is like the only major effort to kind of prove out the thesis that they have with, and I think they're still very early. But I'm definitely very curious to keep watching them because, frankly, they've done an extremely good job, right? And they've done a tremendous job onboarding people. They've done a tremendous job, trying to prove out their use case in the way that they see the blockchain world work, and they've changed a lot of assumptions around how blockchains work generally. So they're probably the most contrarian thinkers on blockchains from the entire market.
Wow.
And so,
because I know, like, again, from what I read online, most blockchains have that trilemma where it's scalability, security, and decentralization. And for me, it's like there's always going to be someone calling themselves an ETH killer, but I almost welcome those people to challenge ETH because I'm curious to see what happens. I mean, there was only maybe there's stuff like before Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin wasn't the first cryptocurrency. There's like Liberty Coin and like I forgot something else, but things will come along and challenge these currencies, and I think as a industry kind of has to be welcomed. Otherwise, you might get into situations where one chain rules it all, and I don't think that's possible. As like a human society, we just can't accept one thing. So yeah, it's exciting to see what they're doing. I'm excited to see like how Solana grows, and yeah, they definitely come a long way, but there's a lot to learn in that space.
Yeah, no, for sure. But yeah, I would say that they're probably the most interesting and the most contrarian, and I hope that they're extremely successful. Although I still obviously like don't really agree with things. But you know what? The whole point is that most of the time I have no idea what I'm talking about. Most of the time, like I'm the dumb one in the room. But it's my job to learn and pay attention and hopefully revise my understanding.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm glad, because same way, it's how I feel. I'm always like absorbing whatever I can from people because I feel like I'm way behind all the time. But you can't keep up with crypto. One person cannot know it all, unless maybe you're Vitalik, but still very tough.
Yeah, no. For
so
sure.
Now that you're in consensus, you're moving forward in your career. Was this the point where you knew that you're going to be in crypto? This is it. This is my life forever. There's no turning back.
There was actually, while I was at consensus, that I had that realization. So the way that happened was this is about mid 2018, mid to late. My then girlfriend, now wife, Lisa Cuesta, or well, I guess it's Lisa Bunin now. But we were sitting on a couch, and she kind of looked at me, and she's like, "All right." And so, just for a little bit of context, sorry. We actually met through crypto. We met at a crypto book signing.
Oh, that's cute. I love that.
Yeah, no, it's actually a really good story. Maybe I'll tell you right after this.
Yeah,
if you're interested. But so she was a VC at the time, and she was kind of like taking a detour through crypto, and so she knew a lot of crypto people, and she got crypto, but she was spending most of her time, most professional time anyway, outside of it. And one of the days so when we were sitting on this couch, and she looks at me and she says, "Why are you so into crypto? Like, what is it about the space that's, drawing you in so much?" And I sat there, and nobody's ever asked me that before. So I didn't have an answer. I sat there and said, let me think about it. And so I sat there and thought about it, and I realized that I had this memory that I forgot about, and I just remembered it when she asked. When I was younger, my first job was at 14, and I was refinancing mortgages.
At 14?
Over the phone. Yeah.
We'll leave that. All right, we'll keep going.
Yeah. Don't worry. I had a school permission slip and everything, like a green note.
So refinance adults' mortgages, but it's all right.
Well, they didn't. I mean, it was on the phone. I was a telemarketer of sorts.
That's funny.
And yeah, I didn't fully understand what a mortgage was, but this was around 2007. And so the one thing I do remember is that I was refinancing mortgages to a fixed rate.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't understand the consequences of that whatsoever. But now looking back, I was one of the good guys.
Yeah, because you're not screwing people over with interest.
Yeah. And so I've been working for a long time, and for a couple of years I was working at a store, and it was a terrible clothing store. And whenever I would get paid, I would often give my mom money. When I was in college, I was also getting financial aid, and there was one day where I wrapped up at the store and I was leaving. It was 10 p.m. and I stopped by the local Chase branch that I've been to many times, and I wanted to take out $3,000, which is more money than I've ever taken out in my life, and because I wanted to give it to my mom on her birthday.
Oh wow!
So I come into the Chase branch, the ATM that I've been to many times, and I put in my card, I put in my PIN. And it says, "How much money do you want?" And I say, "I want like $3,000. And it says, "No." I say, "Well, what do you mean no? And I was like, oh, it must be some kind of error. So I try again and it says no again. You have to call this number. Like, all right, whatever. So I call the number. I said, hey, I'm trying to withdraw $3,000 and it's not letting me. You know what's going on? She says, yeah, your daily withdrawal limit is 2,000. I say, well, okay, but you have me on the phone. Just ask me whatever questions you want. Verify that it's me. I would like my money, please. And she's like, no, sorry, your daily withdrawal limit is 2,000. And I said, what do you mean? And it just, I could not process what she was telling me. And I remember just feeling such immense rage. I was so angry. I thought it was so unfair and I felt so powerless.
Yeah, it's their money.
Yeah. I just could not believe what was happening. I never thought that something like this is possible, that my money's in the bank and they just tell me that I can't have it. I'm like,
screwed up.
What's going on? And so I was seething. I was so mad. And I ended up taking out $2,000, and the next day I came and I withdrew another 1,000, and I completely forgot about that memory. Like I just totally forgot. Yeah, buried it. And when she asked me, I remembered, and I think that was the moment that I don't want to say I got red pilled, but that was the moment that I realized that the money in the bank, it's in my name, isn't my money. It's their money. I'm not in control of it. They are. And they can just not give it to me. And there's nothing I can do about it, which is a crazy thing to think. And as an American citizen, oftentimes people take it for granted that the bank will give you your money back, the full amount that you're supposed to be getting. This is not the lived experience of most parts of the world, right? There's like significant reservations and many banks that they'll give you your money essentially, or they'll take a haircut off of it, like what happened in Cyprus and other places.
Exactly.
As well.
I feel like Americans are the hardest to convince of cryptocurrency just because we kind of have it really easy. We have Venmo, we can use PayPal, we can use Cash App. We have so many ways to transfer money, use money, Zelle, whatever. We have this expectation that our money is ours. There's no quarrel, there's no worry. It's the dollar. It's strong. We're good to go. It's stable. When you go to a different country, they're like, crypto is what makes sense. Crypto is what's going to actually help us. That's the reliable source of money, not the government, because we can't trust our government. But in America, it's like we have a strong trust in our government. But I think now it's really coming to show face. Like even the American government is not impenetrable. It's still something we have to like remember that our stuff is owned by them, and we need to be able to control some aspects of our life, which is what's most precious to us is our belongings, our money, and our people around us.
Yeah. And I think I'm not one of those guys that thinks everybody should only self-custody and we should all take full control of our financial lives and full control of our identity and full control of all our data and all. I just think that's such an incredibly unrealistic standard to set ourselves to. But having said that, let's say I'm not happy with JP Morgan. What do? Okay, well, I need a bank account. So am I going to go to Bank of America? Am I going to go to Wells Fargo? So essentially, like you had a system and you stay within that system. And so money moves around depending on who's doing better or worse in any particular year, but it all stays in the system. And now for the first time, you have the ability to opt out, which is a crazy, crazy thing. It's a crazy power to be able to have because it does two things. One, it doesn't mean that we all have to take self-custody or have to take full control of our financial livelihoods, but we can.
Yeah.
Right. And the fact that you can opt out is an incredibly powerful thing, and you can opt out without anybody being able to prevent you from opting out, which is the other crazy thing. But the second thing is that the reason I don't have a ton of faith in banks is that it's not because they're evil, but it's mostly because a lot of them are incompetent. They're just bad at what they do. They've gone bad and lazy in a lot of big ways. And this is not all banks, right? Like a lot of banks generally try to do a good job. And I've worked with a lot of them. There's a lot of good people in these institutions. And so I don't mean to have a condemnation of all banks, but what I am going to say is that they haven't really had proper competition in a while. And it made them a little bit lazy about it. And I think one of the things that this will do is that I don't think banks are going away. I think banks will continue being part of our lives. I think they serve an incredibly useful purpose. But what this will do is it'll kind of light the fire to say like, hey, you got to get really good, and you have to create a great user experience. You have to take much better care of people. You have to treat people not as I have full control over your financial life, because they can just opt out. So you have to treat them more as a partner and more as somebody that understands and is a collaborator.
That's what I think like crypto banks are doing now, is they're challenging the traditional banks, because like we see scams happening in crypto world all the time. That's less likely to happen with the bank. Like if you do get scammed or someone does hack into your account, you are protected for $250,000 with FDIC and the bank. You can get your money back. It's not easy, but it's a process, but you can get it back. With crypto, it's gone. No one's getting it back for you. No one cares. No government's going to back you up. So yeah, banks are useful in that sense. And I think that's where companies like Coinbase can jump in and say, hey, we're also FDIC insured for a certain amount with, I guess, the dollar. It's like a sweet spot between crypto and traditional finance. And I think that's the challenge that's coming up. And that's going to really disrupt a lot of traditional financial companies. Yeah.
Well, I think that you're along the path to being correct, but I don't know if I would take maybe even a step further, in that when we think about FDIC insurance, it's an American concept for American people and American banks, right? But crypto is global by its very nature. It's inherently global. And so I think the way that we think about services and the way that we think about access and opportunity, but also protections, has to be with a global mindset. And so I do think that financial institutions, like a lot of the exchanges and custodians and other service providers that are within crypto, I think they're going to move closer and closer to what we traditionally think of as a bank. And I think that existing financial intermediaries will move closer and closer towards adopting crypto. But I also think that there's a fundamental difference in the way that we see the world, where in traditional circles they see it as inherently closed and inherently blocked, and there's like gatekeepers and there's all kinds of things that are required, versus here there's nothing required, right? If you have a wallet and it has a certain amount of money, you can go and do whatever you want. You can buy insurance for yourself, you can buy protection for yourself, you can have a multi-sig, you can have a smart contract wallet like Argent, from which you do DeFi interactions and it manages your portfolio, and then you're invested into SET protocol, which does your index fund of assets, and you can do all kinds of crazy stuff in a way that is inherently global and permissionless. And so I do think that all institutions will converge a little bit more over time. But I think that because crypto's approach to it is so fundamentally different, right? It's coming at it from the exact opposite angle. I am hoping that we pull them more towards us rather than us going more towards them. If that makes sense.
It does make sense. And yeah, that's a good way to look at it. And I can see that. I hope for the same too, because it's all about progress, right? You don't want to pull back. So then I guess seeing all this, experiencing all this, one of my favorite questions to ask is, what is your crypto pet peeve?
My crypto pet peeve. I think one of my crypto pet peeves is not being forthcoming about your capabilities, or about the trade-offs that you're making, or about security assumptions that you have. There's a really interesting phenomenon that kind of happens where a protocol, whether it's DeFi or NFT or identity or layer 1, layer 2, whatever, will come along and say, hey, we've solved all the things and we work in this perfect way. You can do whatever you want. And I say, okay, what trade-offs did you make? And they say nothing. And I say, well, either, because there's only two outcomes there, right? Either you are not smart enough to understand the trade-offs that you made, which is a horribly, horribly bad sign, or you're not honest with me about the trade-offs that you made, which is also a really bad sign. And so I think one of the things that I look for is we all make trade-offs, and there's bad things about every protocol. And you look at Bitcoin, a lot of bad things about Bitcoin, right? Super slow and doesn't do a lot, right? Like terrible things. You look at Ethereum. If you talk to anybody that has worked with Solidity or on the EVM, they would all say this could be a lot better. And there's a lot of trade-offs that have been made there as well. And so it's not to say that any protocol that I look at is perfect, but I think the important thing is to really understand what these trade-offs are, because then what you can do is you can factor those understandings into your calculations, into what you're building, into how you're thinking about things, into how you're protecting the protocol, into how you're running infrastructure and what that requires, or when you're building an app, like what that requires. And I think that when you have that transparency around your weak spots, it also draws in people that are super high quality because they're able to see that you're honest about your strengths, but also honest about your weaknesses, and you're all working together to try and fix it. And it's a really healthy community versus, when you say that everything is perfect and you try to put things under the rug, one of the things that ends up doing is that it prevents other people from helping you.
Yeah.
Because they don't even know that it's a problem, and you're just trying to solve it on the background, and it just keeps festering and getting worse. And I think one of the things that we find is that we're all still so early that none of the protocols that we have right now can scale. None of them are private enough. None of them are good enough or do any of the enough of any of the things that we want.
Exactly.
So as we scale, all of these problems will pop up, and the question becomes not if they will pop up, it becomes when they will pop up, and how are we going to fix them. So that's where it's really important to have an understanding of what are your weak spots, sharing that with the community and saying, okay, here are our strong spots, and here's the stuff that we're going to do really well. Here's our weak spots. We need to solve this together. And so I think my pet peeve is when folks aren't like as forthcoming about the weak spots and the trade-offs, and instead try to hide them or don't realize they're making trade-offs, because that is, I think, a recipe for disaster.
That's well put, because that makes perfect sense. And I think that's something that the Ethereum community is really good at, is explaining those differences and explaining that what they are good at, what they are bad at. And I wish like more people would focus on that, the technical side of crypto. It's all too much on Twitter and on the mainstream media and news in general. Even when friends are talking, it's all like, what's the price? It went up, it went down, it's crashing, it's going up. It's like, there's so much more to this that needs to be shared and educated with the community. And it's like, I feel like for me, like my whole purpose here is like try to push that out. Is like, there's a lot more into crypto than just what it's valued at. And the reason it's valued at something is because of like what you described, the tech behind it, the people behind that are working on it.
Yeah, 100%.
Do you think crypto changed your life? What do you think you'd be doing if you just never got into it, you just ignored the white paper?
Lord, I mean, my life would have been terrible. Honestly, because the fear that I don't know that it would have been terrible. The fear that I had as a consultant was that I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And, before I got into crypto, I was very seriously considering because when you're a consultant and you don't know what you want to do, what do? You go and get an MBA.
Yeah, I got my MBA, so
yeah.
I didn't know what I was going to do though, so it's fine.
Yeah, no, exactly, right? And there's two types of people that go and get an MBA. There's ones that know exactly what they're doing with it, and ones that have no idea what they're doing.
Definitely the latter for me.
Yeah. And so I knew that I wanted to, if there's anything that I cared about, it would have been not so much, just environmental, not so much science, but things to do with green energy and sustainability, but not from a Greenpeace perspective, but more from a Tesla perspective. Okay. Right? Like working at a business that isn't so much trying to save the planet, quote unquote, but works in such a way that it is...
It's an efficient company.
Yeah, that's efficient. It's going to be saving the planet in a little bit of a different way, where it's not the main goal, but it's like one of the main goals, right? So what I was going to do is I was going to get a dual degree between a master's in either environmental science or some other variation of master's of green energy or something like that. and then a MBA with it. And there was a couple of programs I was looking at between Stanford, Berkeley, Ross, which is Michigan, and MIT. And I had already visited Stanford and Berkeley by the time that I got into crypto. And I've been to MIT before, I think. Ross is the only one that I never actually went to. So probably if I didn't get into crypto, I would have finished my degree and been in a lot of debt, like a ton of debt. And then I would have been working some corporate job, probably like a good one. I can't imagine it being a bad job, but I would definitely be just a corporate person.
Yeah, that's something I feel like, especially after like the pandemic, has become like a realization of what you want to do with your time. I think being stuck at home for a long time makes you think, okay, how do I value myself and how do I want to show myself as a valuable person? Because I don't know, when you go to an office, it's kind of like distracting. You commute, you go to work, distracted, you come back, you're distracted, you come home, you're distracted. But when you have an extra few hours a day to think, just see what you're doing, or see how you are every day, it's kind of like a realization like, I don't necessarily want to be in a corporate job. I want to build my own business or have a side hustle while working at my corporate job to like give back to the community. And I found myself doing that exactly. It's like, I've been in the crypto industry for a long time, learning as much as I can, but this is my way of like, okay, to give back, share a story, learn about people. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah, no, it's super good. I'm glad you're doing this.
Now, one of my last questions is, what is your favorite wholesome crypto moment?
My favorite wholesome crypto moment.
Something that made you smile, excited in the crypto industry.
Yeah, I mean, so I really enjoy helping people get jobs in crypto.
Nice.
Like, really, it gives me so much pleasure. I would never be a recruiter. That's not something I'm interested in whatsoever. But when I have, especially friends that I've known for a long time that are into crypto or have been reading about it for a while or trying to get a job for a while, after you help them, I mean, it's just, there is such a light in their eyes, and there's a pep in their step, and they're happy, and they're smiling, and they're hugging, and they're just, like, you've changed somebody's life. I think that's actually the biggest status symbol of them all, is like how many lives have you changed, more so than money or anything else. And I take immense pride in helping folks, get into crypto and do what they're really, really passionate about. And it's funny because it ends up working in really interesting ways. There's a Asaf Yishayev who, he's been kind of like following in my footsteps a little bit, and then we've been helping each other out. And so, because I'm a year ahead of him, and so I was in EY before him, and then he joined. I was at EY before him, and then he joined, and he helped me get into crypto. And then this whole time he's been working at EY, but finally he was ready to leave, and he was interested in a job in crypto. And I was helping him and referring him to a bunch of places, and we were talking about a lot of stuff and talking about different opportunities. And where he ended up getting hired was actually Celsius.
Oh.
And and he's been a long time user and super passionate about it. But the funny thing is that the chief risk officer over there, I knew him for a while too, and I helped him when he was looking for a job. And so he took a job at Celsius, and then it just so happened that he was looking to build out his team, and Asaf was really great on the risk and compliance side. And so I connected the two of them, and ended up being a good fit. And so then Asaf ended up joining Celsius. Awesome. And so it's like this really interesting path. And, he's super happy and having a great time, and, Celsius is doing really well. And so it's just crazy to me. Right. And Asaf has obviously changed my life, because he's the one that got me into crypto. If he didn't help me buy Bitcoin when he did, there's a good chance that I never would have gotten into crypto. And so a lot of my success is owed directly to him. Like one for one. It's like, if you didn't take that afternoon and sit down with me and help me open up an account, I would not be where I am.
Good friends make all the difference, huh?
Yeah. And it just, being able to do that for somebody is crazy. It's such a crazy cool thing. It's wild when you think about it.
It is. It's always so good to give back. It's such like it's a good feeling. And I'm glad that you're doing that. And I'm glad to see that's working out.
Yeah. And that's something that I'd really like to leave people with. In that, I remember there was a moment, so this was 2 or 3 years ago, before COVID. My wife, my then fiance, now wife, Lisa, and I went to Poland for a wedding. And prior to the wedding, there was a couple of days of just touring with buses, and you go to different cities and check things out within Poland. And I remember we went to this salt mine, and salt was a great source of wealth at that time because it was extremely expensive and made you a lot of money, and you could do really, really well. And so these salt mines would be incredibly deep and just these huge cavernous experiences. But because they were so deep, and because Poland was such a religious country at the time, and it still is today, but at the time it was like really religious. You, as a worker, it would take a lot of work to go all the way back every week, like above ground, in order to go to church. And so what they would do is actually build churches within the mines themselves. And there would be like a lot of churches within the mines.
And they're still there today, so that's what you're looking at. That's cool.
Yeah. And so as we're touring this salt mine, we get to, quote unquote, like the final stop or the end for us. And there was this really beautiful church with these big ceilings and, lots of art. And on the ceilings, you had these names of what I assume at the time were great people, either people that helped fund it, or people that were priests, or people that were whatever. It's like important people that they adored. One of the largest mines, one of the largest salt mines in Poland, and this is like the largest church within the largest salt mine. Like, this is an important place. I looked at these names and I said, I have no idea who these people are, and I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, nobody, like, there's, I'm sure hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that tour these mines every year, and not one of them cares about any of these people. And, when I got to thinking about it, I realized that none of the stuff that we do here really matters at the end of the day, right? It does for sure. But, the stuff that really matters, and that we're going to be thinking about as we're on our deathbeds, is our friends and our family, and were we good to other people? Were we considerate? Did we make amends with the people that have wronged us or that we've wronged? And so when I think about the stuff that I do and the stuff that I accomplish, the thing that I keep coming back to, and the only thing that matters, is like friends and family. And you still do a good job. And I'm not saying go and do a bad job at work and go and do a bad job, whatever. I'm not saying
understood.
Don't do that. But that's the stuff really that matters in our lives. So that's the advice. And then that's one of the things that I like about crypto, is that everybody's so invested in each other's success. Yeah. People answer you, people help you, and they want you to be successful, and they want to give you opportunity to be successful, and they want you to be invested in their success. And so, which is one of the things that is so special about crypto, that's so different from any other industry anywhere else in the world.
I love that. Thank you. And it's
yeah.
Thank you so much, Viktor. You're always great to listen to, always great to follow, and thank you for sharing your success. And I'm excited to watch you keep growing.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
See everybody.